James adjusted Lily's backpack strap as she stood on her tiptoes to kiss his cheek. The morning air was crisp, sunlight bouncing off car windows as they crossed the parking lot of their neighborhood grocery store. She skipped ahead, humming, something from the cartoons she liked. James watched her, smiling softly, though the weight of loneliness still pressed at the edges of his chest. It had been 2 years since Claire left. A hollow departure marked by a scrawled note and an affair that bloomed while he worked overtime shifts to provide for their daughter. The betrayal never quite let go, no matter how many therapy sessions or long walks he took. But James had learned to carry the silence, to pour his love into Lily, and let that be enough. Inside the store, Lily grabbed a box of cereal and asked if they could have pancakes for dinner. James nodded absent-mindedly, navigating their way toward the produce section. That's when he saw her. A woman with auburn hair, carefully twisted into a loose bun, struggled with a bag of apples that had just burst open. The fruit scattered, rolling under shelves and carts. Without thinking, James knelt down and started gathering them. She looked up, startled, then offered a grateful smile. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft, the kind that lingered after it was gone. "No problem. Happens to me all the time," James replied, handing her the last apple. She laughed gently. "I doubt that." Lily tugged at his sleeve, whispering, "She's pretty." James smiled awkwardly and turned back to the woman. She straightened up, brushing her hands against her coat. "Emma," she said, extending her hand. "James, and this is Lily." Emma bent down to greet the girl, her smile tender. "Nice to meet you, Lily. You have your dad's eyes." James felt a strange warmth spread through his chest. It had been a long time since a stranger said anything like that. As they walked toward the checkout, James offered to help carry her things to the car. She hesitated, then nodded. "Sure. That would be kind of you." Outside, the parking lot buzzed with the usual Saturday activity. As he loaded the groceries into her trunk, Emma stood beside him, arms crossed against the breeze. "You always help damsels in distress?" she teased. James smirked. "Only the ones who drop apples." Emma's laugh was quieter this time. As she opened her car door, she hesitated. "You live around here?" "A few blocks away, just me and Lily." Emma looked thoughtful. "That's nice. The two of you seem close." "She's my world," James said simply. Emma nodded but said nothing more. Her eyes seemed to search his face for something. A flicker of hesitation passing behind them before she offered a small wave and slid into her seat. James watched the car drive off and noticed something odd. There was no car seat. No signs of a family inside. She hadn't worn a ring, but something about her composure, her guardedness, felt practiced, like a woman who knew how to hide. Later that afternoon, Lily was building a blanket fort while James stirred a pot of pasta. His thoughts drifted. Emma. There was something familiar about the way she carried sadness, like she had secrets that mirrored his own. Not in the same way, but shaped by the same absence. "Dad, was she a princess?" Lily asked suddenly. From beneath a cushion, James chuckled. "Who?" "The lady at the store. She looked like the ones from the books." He paused, thinking. Maybe. She seemed like someone from a story, didn't she? "Will we see her again?" Lily asked. "I don't know," James replied honestly. But even as he answered, he caught himself glancing out the window, wondering. Emma sat in her car a few streets over, watching the house number scribbled on a small receipt in her hand. She'd followed them, not out of obsession, but instinct. There was something about that little girl, about James's quiet presence, that tugged at a part of her she'd tried to bury. She knew she shouldn't be here. Her husband, Daniel, was at work, or so he claimed. More likely, he was with her, the woman Emma had found lipstick-stained shirts from and half-read texts that never made sense. Their marriage had become a series of cold breakfasts and polite nods, conversations reduced to weather reports and shared bills. She hadn't planned to meet anyone, especially not someone like James. But fate had a cruel way of mocking you. A kind man with tired eyes. A daughter full of joy. A life that seemed simple, not easy, but real. Emma turned the key in the ignition and drove off before she could think too long. Her heart pounded. She didn't know if she wanted to be rescued or reminded that people like James still existed. That night, James sat on the porch with a book in hand and a blanket draped over his legs. The stars were faint above the street lamps, but enough to remind him that the world was still turning, even if parts of him had stopped trying. He thought about Emma's smile, the hesitation in her eyes, the way she looked at Lily like she had once wanted something just like that and lost it. He didn't know her story, but somehow, it felt like he might want to. And somewhere not far away, Emma lay in a bed she no longer shared, staring at the ceiling, wondering how a single afternoon could leave her feeling more alive and more ashamed than the past year of her life. Neither of them knew yet that their stories were about to intertwine. That love, broken and bruised, had a way of finding the ones most afraid to touch it again. It started with a chance meeting, or so James believed. A week after their brief encounter at the grocery store, he took Lily to the park after school. The sky was gray but dry, and Lily ran toward the swings, her laughter rising above the wind. James found his usual bench and opened a book, though he wasn't really reading. Then he saw her. Emma sat on the opposite bench, hands in her coat pockets, her hair tied loosely again, strands catching the breeze. She looked up, and their eyes met briefly, knowingly. She smiled first. "I guess we have similar routines," she said, crossing the path toward him. "Or similar instincts," James replied. "This park's the best for kids." Emma nodded, watching Lily push herself higher on the swing. "She looks happy." "She is," James said. "She doesn't remember much about before. She just knows I'm here." "That matters more than anything," Emma said quietly. James studied her. She was different today, more open, though a quiet sadness still lingered. They talked easily this time. Emma knelt to tie Lily's shoe at one point, her touch natural, gentle. Lily hugged her in return, surprising even James. Emma's eyes shimmered briefly. Over the next few days they kept running into each other, once at the bakery, once outside the library, and again at the park. Eventually, Emma admitted she passed by there on purpose, hoping to see them. "It's not just Lily," she said, laughing nervously. "I like talking to you." James didn't push it. He wasn't used to compliments that didn't come with expectations, but he found himself looking forward to her presence. It became familiar, like sunlight warming a cold room. One afternoon, they sat at the edge of the sandbox, watching Lily dig with plastic shovels. James cleared his throat. "Claire, my ex, she cheated on me. With someone I thought was a friend. Left us one morning without even saying goodbye to Lily." Emma looked down. "I'm sorry." He nodded. "It took a long time to stop blaming myself." "You shouldn't have to carry that weight," she said, voice tight. James glanced at her, catching the storm that briefly crossed her face. "You said once you understand betrayal?" Emma hesitated. "More than you know." But she didn't say more. When James asked about her family, she smiled and said they lived far away. She avoided questions about home, dodged with soft redirections and nervous laughter. Still, the connection deepened. They began meeting deliberately. Lily called her Miss Emma and drew her pictures. Emma brought homemade cookies one day, which James admitted he hadn't tasted since Claire left. One cloudy afternoon, as Lily ran ahead to the car, Emma and James lingered behind. "You make me feel," she started, then stopped. James took a step closer. "Me too." Their faces neared. Her breath hitched. The air between them trembled. For a moment, James thought it would happen. A kiss, simple but full of everything unsaid. But Emma stepped back, her eyes wide. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I can't." James's jaw clenched. "I didn't mean to. No, it's not you. It's me. I shouldn't be." He stepped back, stung. "Right." Emma looked torn, like she wanted to explain but couldn't. She turned and walked, away quickly, leaving James standing alone as Lily called from the car. Emma's front door clicked shut behind her. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Daniel wasn't home. She didn't even know where he was anymore. Work or with someone else. Someone. He didn't bother to hide from her anymore. She walked past the couch they used to curl up on, now a place for discarded jackets. Past the dining table they used to share meals at, now covered with unopened mail. Her phone lit up with a message from Daniel. Running late. Don't wait up. She didn't even know who he was anymore. In the bathroom, Emma sat on the edge of the tub, tears streaming down silently. Her reflection in the mirror looked like someone else. Someone broken, numb. She remembered the first time she found the lipstick stain. How she convinced herself it was an accident. The late-night calls he took outside, the hotel charges he brushed off. She confronted him once, crying, shaking. He didn't deny it. He didn't even apologize. "You're just boring now, Em," he had said. "You used to shine." That was the night her heart stopped trying. She wasn't looking for someone new. She had buried that part of herself. But James was different. He saw her, and she saw herself in his eyes, someone still worth something. And Lily, that sweet girl, had touched something maternal in Emma that she hadn't felt in years. She reached for a notebook and began writing a letter. James. I never meant for this to happen. I never meant to lie. I just wanted to feel like I was alive, again. Being with you and Lily. It reminded me of the woman I used to be before I became someone's afterthought. I'm still married. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I was afraid you'd look at me differently. I'm not proud of what I've become, but for a while you made me feel like I mattered again. Thank you. Emma. She stared at the words, tears dotting the paper. Then she folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer. She couldn't send it. Not yet. She lay in bed that night beside a man who didn't notice she was crying, facing opposite directions, two strangers under the same roof. Somewhere across town, James sat on his porch, a blanket over his legs, replaying every moment with Emma, wondering what he missed. He didn't know her secrets. But something in his gut told him this wasn't the end. 3 days passed, and Emma didn't show up at the park. James checked at the bakery, strolled past the library, even lingered in the grocery store with Lily pretending to pick up extra milk. But there was no sign of her. No texts. No closure. He tried to shrug it off, but it gnawed at him. Not just the absence, but the quiet that came with it. The suddenness. The silence he remembered too well from when Claire left. Lily noticed too. Is Miss Emma sick? She asked one evening while coloring at the kitchen table. James paused, the knife hovering mid-slice above a tomato. I don't know, sweetie. Can we call her? James forced a smile. We don't have her number, remember? Lily looked disappointed. But I drew her a picture. James folded the knife into the cutting board and excused himself to the porch. The cold air hit him like a slap. He hated how easily hope had crept in, how he'd let someone inside again. Maybe it had all been in his head. Maybe she was just another person looking for escape, not connection. He sat in the quiet, feeling stupid, foolish. Claire had broken something inside him, and he'd thought Emma might help him find the missing pieces. Now it felt like a cruel rerun. He'd let Lily grow attached, too, and that made it worse. The fourth evening, James was reading to Lily when the doorbell rang. He opened the door and froze. Emma stood on the steps, soaked from the rain, hair plastered to her face. Her eyes were rimmed with red, and her hands trembled. Hi, she said, voice barely above a whisper. James didn't speak, just stepped aside. Inside, she stood like a guest who didn't belong anymore. I'm sorry I disappeared, she said. I didn't know how to come back. James crossed his arms. Why did you leave? Emma looked at Lily, now dozing off on the couch under a blanket. She stepped into the kitchen with James, lowering her voice. I need to tell you everything, she said. And then she did. She told him about Daniel, the years of being overlooked, the infidelities, the cold bed and colder silences. She explained how she never intended to fall for anyone. She was just drawn to the warmth she saw between James and Lily. The ease, the kindness. It reminded her of what she never had. "I didn't lie to hurt you," she said. I didn't know how to be honest without ruining what little connection I had left with someone who saw me." James let it settle. The anger in him was there, but it didn't boil. It simmered. "I don't know what hurts more," he said slowly. "That you didn't tell me, or that I understand why you didn't." Emma stepped closer. "You and Lily, you felt like home, but I was a stranger walking through your door pretending I belonged." James looked at her, searching for something he could hold on to. "You made me feel alive again," he admitted. "But you also made me question if I was just filling the gap left by someone else's guilt." "I never used you," she said quickly. "That part, what I felt, was real." They sat in silence for a while. Rain tapped gently on the windows. Somewhere in the living room, Lily stirred, mumbling in her sleep. Emma reached for James's hand, and he let her, but only for a moment. "I'm not asking for anything," she said. "I just needed you to know." James looked at her softer. "Now." "So what happens next?" Emma drew in a breath. "I'm leaving him, not because of you, not to be with someone else. I'm leaving because I've been lying to myself for years. I deserve to wake up and not feel like I'm suffocating." James nodded, something loosening in his chest. "Then do it for you," he said. "Don't let this become just another way you disappear." She smiled, sad but grateful. "You gave me hope again." James didn't respond. He just watched her. The way she stood stronger now, like someone who'd finally chosen to live. 3 months later, the park was beginning to bloom again. Children laughed on the swings. Kites fluttered in the open field. Emma sat on the same bench where she'd first met James, a book in her lap she hadn't opened. She was different now, freer. Her divorce had finalized quietly. Daniel hadn't even fought her on it. Maybe he was glad to be done. Maybe he'd already replaced her. She didn't care anymore. The wind lifted a strand of hair across her face. She tucked it behind her ear, breathing in the afternoon air. Then she heard it. The unmistakable squeal of Lily's laughter. She looked up. James walked down the path, Lily on his shoulders, both of them smiling. Emma stood, unsure. James stopped a few steps away. Lily jumped down and ran to hug her waist. "Miss Emma!" she squealed. Emma dropped to her knees and hugged her tight. When she looked up, James was watching her. He didn't speak right away. Then, softly, "I'm glad you came back." Emma smiled. "I didn't know if I should." James shrugged. "I'm not promising anything. I'm still figuring it out." "I know," she said. "But I'm here," he added. They stood like that. Two people scarred but healing, with nothing guaranteed, and everything still possible. And as Lily dragged them both toward the swings, Emma felt something she hadn't in years. Hope.